Let me say, colleagues, distinguished visitors, ladies and gentlemen, it's my great pleasure to welcome back to his alma mater, President Michael D. Higgins and his wife Sabina, on this very important occasion. So, fear fáilte rá do Uachtarán, Jules Gunnair and Galway. So, in 2011, on November the 11th, Michael D. Higgins was inaugurated as the 9th President of Ireland. He is the first Galway graduate to hold the office of First Citizen. Michael D. Higgins enrolled in this university in 1962 as a mature student, and since that time, his life has been inextricably linked with our university. Active in student life, serving as President of the Student Council, going on to become a member and a highly regarded lecturer in sociology and politics for very many years, serving as adjunct professor in the Irish Centre for Human Rights, and a tremendous asset and a tremendous character for this university. On a personal level, I can say I've known Michael D. Higgins since I came here as a student almost 40 years ago. He has demonstrated a tremendous commitment to education in its widest possible sense, as a mature student, as a student representative, distinguished academic, and a holder of public office. All of these roles highlight his deeply held belief in the importance of education, creativity, and ideas. In his inaugural address, he identified creativity as one of the defining values of his presidency, which he described as, and I quote, a presidency of ideas, recognizing and open to new paradigms of thought and actions. It will inspire to turn the best of ideas to living realities, realizing our limitless potentials and possibilities, our féidirtí gan teorainn, end of quote. Indeed, speaking just last week, he again referred to the centrality of creativity in addressing a wide range of global challenges. I quote, "The provision of a space for exploring and nurturing creativity is essential if we are to make free a future generation to develop their imagination and explore their unique potential and possibilities within a truly fair and inclusive society." This is a matter which I have spoken many times, and a debate which has become increasingly significant in recent years, as we seek to rebuild our economy, our international reputation, and our perception of how we wish to be defined as a people and a society, end of quote. In these remarks, our President speaks with both conviction and experience. As Ireland's First Minister for the Arts in the 1990s, Michael D. Higgins' achievements included the reinvigoration of the film industry, the repeal of censorship and the Broadcasting Act section providing for censorship. He also established a rich network of local arts and cultural venues. Michael D. Higgins is also a writer and a poet, contributing to many books on topics as diverse as Irish politics, sociology, history and culture. He has published 2 collections of essays entitled Causes for Concern, Irish Politics, Culture and Society, and a second publication, Renewing the Republic. He has published 4 collections of poetry, The Betrayal, The Season of Fire, A Narrowed Season, and New and Selected Poems. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm honoured to present an alumnus of this university, Michael D. Higgins, to you.
Uachtaráin na Hillscoile is Iarna Uisles Gwini Cór Ir Coileacatha sa Górja Tá Fíor Cinósa Bheithlíh agus Ocathóra gar an seans an na Pópieri bhí me géiste leob cúpla nómad ó hin. Gar míle mágat asach an cuiretíocht agus as cumáile sin as an Firkin fóilte Irish of Hain, Red Mahernas, Mavan Kayla Saivin. Is pleasure to go ni damse court hurtar ulskell, ake an count shock a hoide, Margo to Hainu, Tron is some blian a common ulskell ni here Garliv, Mar Macklin, Agus ni Yishin, Mar Leactor, Agus is like him not piog, Hogam ni blianta shin con cuivnia, so Kahaga will an ulskell show, an art in a will she. sitje vrøk na Coimbra count des na sievana alskelia is tarrantly da will foil in Europe. Agus tris liamla, agus tris liamlis and colosta, as on this board agru. It is such a great pleasure to visit a university at any time, and I have been using opportunities to visit universities and expand on what it was that I meant at that inauguration phrase, the presidency of ideas. And you'll be encouraged to know that I have already changed my script from this morning on foot of listening to these 4 excellent presentations. It's always a great pleasure to be back here. I remember so clearly in 1962, my first days in what was then University College Galway, and encountered there too many friendships which I'm pleased to say have endured. And it is as I look back now across a long spectrum of time and lots of spectrum of different experiences, I see, and maybe it is what I have only to offer this morning, is a reflection on some of the language that I have heard and that was so valuable this morning. And words do matter. There is no greater word than friendship, for example. And I think that people come to universities to hope for friendship, to make friendships. And they also, I think, when they look back through memory, they think of friendships that might have endured. In doing so, they are touching something that is powerfully ethical. After all, it was Aristotle that said, the demands of friendship make a greater demand than the demands of justice. And it is about words and language that I want to say something, and I also want to connect very directly to what I've been hearing. And I think it was so important and very balanced. I think Galway University as well is some place where I think sometimes I'm delighted that scientists and artists are being celebrated in the same morning. It has a distinguished record. It is the noted astronomer and physicist Alexander Anderson, graduated with a master's degree from this college in 1881. And then he went on from there to Cambridge, returning in 1885. And he's widely credited as the first person to suggest the existence of black holes. Notable scholars included Alice Perry, the first female engineering graduate in 1906, and somebody that I have a great affection for, and I've been thinking about quite a bit lately, J.E. Cairns, whose influential work, The Slave Power, shaped the thinking of such intellectuals as Abraham Lincoln, Charles Darwin, and Karl Marx. And Cairns was also very important as not only an original thinker and writer, it is in the high time of economic theory, but he also was very important in providing a refutation to bad policy delivered with terrible results based on very bad economic theory. It is in this sense of his public intellectual contribution that has made him attractive to me in recent times. I think noteworthy as well, it was a great privilege to have been here as a teacher and a colleague in the university at the time of Mick Lally, Mary Mullen, Sean McGinley, Gary Hines. And indeed, I remember Seamus McMahuna at his time when he was involved with classics and went on to be such a distinguished academic secretary. And I pay tribute to him and the leadership he's given in the Coimbra group. And I'd like to pay tribute to all of you who have been supporting this inter-university discourse. As I listened to the papers, and they're very, so strong, ending so splendidly and so strongly as they did, on celebrating all of those things in which we are among the best in the world. And I do wish those optimistic I do wish that those absolutely positive messages were in fact given more often. In the phrase which I'm using, for example, in my inaugural speech, yes, there are limitless possibilities, and these figures prove it. But going back through the other speakers as well, There are very important points raised. The President introduced me as somebody who has published some volumes of poems, for example. It's very interesting to think of the phrase that poets use when asked, what are you doing? Or what did you do? And they regularly use the phrase, I'm making a poem. And making a poem is very important in the way that it happens. Poets differ. In my own case, I begin with images and then go on to sounds and then setting. Other people, I write in longhand, everything I write. Other people use modern equipment, keyboards, and they stare at a line and look at it as it's changing. But I think the notion of making is very important. I attended a long time ago, one of my best memories of University College Galway as it then was a course I joint taught with somebody from industrial engineering, Dr. Richard Galt. And we had an international conference, and it was about making music. And it looked at all of the technology of making a violin and the wood and the string. And then a man came, Mr. Lyons came, and he played the violin. And this is about, if you like, to my mind, what interests me, is about the importance of having an integrated view of scholarship and an integrated ethical impulse towards living together. It's very hard for me to say that we are in the hardest times in the European Union since the foundation of the Union. But yet it is true, but my saying it doesn't dismiss its relevance or its significance. And really everything we do has to take into account the 115 million Europeans that are at risk of poverty, the 26 million young people under the age of 35, the 5.7 million who are in fact in this very smaller age category again, and nearly 4 million who are neither in education nor in training nor in employment. And the dramatist would say at the end of a play, making it about all of this, maybe making a play like we make a poem, what are we to make of all of this? There's a great line in Tom Murphy's play Famine, where Mary Mullins says, she said, bread, 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 that's all we wanted, and all the smart people in the world. And the way that line hangs and reminds us in many ways that the purpose of scholarship is to come to know ourselves and our world, to be able not only to remember, but also to be able to envision forms of living together, forms of greater responsibility, of achieving intergenerational justice, of taking human rights clauses from dry texts and putting them into the living experience of people in different cultures and different contingencies. I think, and well, we do so need science, but I often think of another great scientist in the neighbourhood here in Galway. I think of Dr. Tom Cooley. Dr. Tom Cooley attended what was called the Tech in Tuam. He was in the same class as Tom Murphy, the playwright, and Michael Brennan, the General Secretary of the Electrical Trade Union. And they left their secondary school and went to the Tech because they wanted to build an airplane. And one of them said to me once, he said, my mother told me how she made 42 different kinds of bread. And when Vickers Aerospace, that was making weapons of destruction for war, was shrinking its workforce in the 1980s, Mike Cooley put together all the different groups of workers in the space and had meetings with them, and they decided, what could we make? And they sent out an inquiry, this might be of interest at this conference, to 127 universities, and they got 3 replies. And they had a meeting of the shop stewards, and they decided that there weren't really such great suggestions. So they then had their own canteen meetings. And it went on, and from that particular group came people who provided mobility carriages for spina bifida victims, new approaches in relation to dialysis, and in groups because they had done a skills audit Or what was the capacity and imagination of all of the workers who may have had been producing weapons for most of their lives, were free to use all of their intelligences. And this, for those of us who are poets, are not unconscious. We do take cognizance of the world around us. Remember discussing with my colleague the 180 different configurations of a lathe, for example. But taking all of this experience and capacity of the world is so important. And the final paper that you had, isn't the issue, isn't it wonderful to think that there is this one great capacity in our intelligent, wonderful population? And isn't the issue really then, in many cases, to have it be for the benefit of as many people as possible? To have it be for the benefit not just of the European Union, but of the whole world. And therefore, when people say the crisis in the European Union, I think that Jürgen Habermas is right. The principal crisis is one of the architecture of the Union itself, not reflecting significantly, as it were, the best instincts and vision of the people of Europe, of it being somehow contradicted by certain arrangements that prevail. I think he has used the phrase recently in one of his speeches, I think at the University of Leuven, of a new kind of high modernity of technical rationality. And one needs to be very careful about words like modernity. In the case of Ireland, we have had to be modern several times. We had to be modern when our people died in the famine. We had to be modern when migratory workers went to England. We had to be modern when we exchanged one language for another. So therefore, modernity is not the achievement, for example, it is rejected as the achievement by himself of James Joyce within the novel in English, which was taken by the Irish as a language in which they would perform. Turning to the four papers taken together, may I make a humble suggestion? It is reflecting on C.P. Snow. What welds the two cultures together, and I think Snow missed this, was that it is the quality of the question that matters. It is the question that matters. It is both the discovery and the disturbance of the question that matters. The answers are always tentative. Science sometimes has gone out the window when certainties, creating an old burden, have stood in the way of discovery. But the question is what is important. Questions that are there in the neglected history of the philosophy of Europe. What can we know? What should we do? How to live a good life? These are questions that are incredibly important if we are indeed to deal with global questions that require interdisciplinary work but require also global partnerships, be it hunger, be it nutrition, be it climate change itself. I think that I've just said something that bothers me about the European Union, and that is why I liked maybe the strong statements in these papers. Why is the European Union not confident of its intellectual tradition? Why is it not saying, in the complex conditions of a changing globalization, our contribution as a union will be to draw on all the scholarly values that have been there, be it in terms of the different times that for democracy, respect for workers, respect for the environment, the independence of science. Even more importantly, going out front with all of the ways and confessions of how, and stated clearly of how we have sometimes, in the service of empire, distorted the best of scholarship and the best of intellectual inquiry, and some suggestions. And then go to the world with no hubris, but with humility, and say, we are interested in listening and engaging with your intuitive wisdom, all those great pieces of wisdom that are in all the cultures of the world, that simply need respect. But of course, if you're on the disrespectful side, you might say, their intellectual property hasn't been codified yet. They simply only know it and have it for generations. But that mightn't matter. And I think we should think in terms of the contribution that Europe has to make. When we speak of Europe in crisis, its crisis is quite an administrative one. Its crisis is also one that is an intellectual one. And I think that certainly I have mentioned the figures of the unemployed and those at threat of poverty. And it would be very easy, as those of us who are taking it seriously see, how an economic crisis could turn itself into a legitimation crisis. But I get very real about some things as I try to remember back all those decades ago I was introduced to economics in this university. I remember the subject was called political economy. At that time, in the great British universities and in the European universities. It may not be called political economy now. And it was very interesting to hear in the papers as well about how great crisis can produce great imaginative, creative contributions. Well, let us remember that these happen in administration as well. One of the responses to World War II was the British, one of the responses to the wars in Britain was the National Health Service. A great humane contribution, from which, of course, to which Irish immigrants, so many of them, and some casual, seasonal immigrants would benefit again and again and again. But if our major challenges facing our global society remain with us, and if they are indeed global poverty, inequality, and food security, we must also, with a humorous way, realize the contradictions within which we live. We are moved by the new technology of television to be regularly in tears at the existence of famine around our planet. I remember being in Somalia during the famine. I remember the time the cameras arrived, and I also remember the time they went away. And one of the most interesting about people being moved by famine is people are not a bit moved by the fact that you have widespread speculation in foodstuffs. For example, last year, the proportion of wheat futures that were owned by speculative hedge funds is exactly 5 times what it was in the 1990s. So there's one part of people which is, for example, compassionate, and there's another part which you really don't want to know. Because, economics has become quite complicated. Well, it hasn't really. There's some parts of it very simple. We have moved towards a kind of progression in relation to recent times, that when Habermas or when others of us speak about a legitimation crisis, what we mean is this. The publics are feeling that they are not being listened to at times about how they feel, and sometimes about how the scholarship that they need isn't being delivered to them. And there is a strain of thought that is available, which is perfectly free. I am the person who abolished censorship of one form, and I listen to all ideas. But I'd like to say, rather like my time as Minister for Culture, I said, I am in favour of people making films in any part of Europe. I think that some of the finest films made in the world are made in the United States. But I don't think all of the films in the world should be made on the west coast of the United States, near Los Angeles. It is a matter of what are you open to. And we are not open to the discourses that we need. I think, for example, the notion that rating agencies can in fact exercise pressure not only on central banks but on states, evaluating states in terms of their risk. And this enables me to take up some of your words, such as innovation. I suppose we could agree that not all innovations are inherently good. There have been some innovations that have been markedly bad. I think, for example, the decision to amend the Glass-Steagall Act to go along with what Alan Greenspan did when he said, the market is screaming for product. And as he said, derivatives have enabled us to unbundle risk. And a flood of products without basis are released as a virus through the world. And then in turn, curiously, another contradiction, the underwriting of these products is handled by those who will in fact evaluate them. They could get AAA rating. And then as they float on and are absorbed into the economic system, the same as the human body takes in a particular virus, what happens is people have to live with it. So therefore then the next stage that one is at, is that you move on then and you find that we are in fact we're opening and widening the space between democratic control and accountability within the union that we have such hopes for, the union that we want to go into the globalization debate with all its wonderful achievement in European history. This is the context to which I came to these papers, and this is the context which I'm so grateful to be here. I want to say how much I support Maura Geoghegan Quinn. I met her recently in Strasbourg, where she represented the Commission. When I spoke there, I think that she is so right. She has said creativity, research and innovation are exactly what we need now for our universities and indeed for society more generally. I think that these are very important statements. Our communication to the European Parliament of achieving a target of spending 3% of European Union gross domestic product on research and development by 2020 could create 317 million jobs, and it could increase GDP by close to 2,800 billion by 2025. It recognizes, I think when she was saying that these phrases recognize the importance of unemployment, the destructive consequences of neglecting unemployment. It is the biggest problem in the European Union. And it is wonderful that we have the Commissioner of great strength to drive forward the R&D budget, and that she has such a good and warm relationship with the universities, and that she's speaking in a way that respects not only scientists and also, but the ambience in which science takes place. I agree with the European Commission in its general sense when it says that a strategic plan for investment in our knowledge foundation is of fundamental importance. But you know about these words itself, the words are important. Václav Havel once said, words can kill, words can liberate. I've said something about the word innovation. We all over the world are paying the price of an innovation that was wrong. So then what is innovation? It could be simply changing or tweaking, is a new word I'd like to use sometime. You can't put it in a poem, is that you would find in relation to what is clearly dysfunctional. I think that the word creativity, the debate is interesting in relation to that from the time I was Minister for Arts, Culture and the Gaeltacht there. And that is we had a debate on arts policy. And the debate on arts policy moved into a debate on cultural policy. Very difficult to get going in the European Union because culture had a bad history. And then after cultural history, we went on then to the creative area. And then suddenly the creative industries emerged. Now the creative industries are very attractive to people at the present time because it is one sector of the global economy that has not gone into recession. Indeed, it has sustained a level of growth in good times that far outstrips any other sector. It has in the European Union 5.6 million people working in what are called the creative industries. But it was very, very interesting. Its turnover, the European creative industries turnover in 2003 was 654 billion euro. So suddenly it was rather like this. I would put it uncharitably if I said, is that having rattled the bag, we found that maybe we've been neglecting the creative industry. It became very fashionable to talk about it. There is a report from UNCTAD, there's a report from the European Commission. These reports are promising and I am strongly in favour of them. But I must say, as a former president of the Council of Culture Ministers in the European Union, the evidence is interesting. It is that the most jobs of a sustained kind, with the most sustained income, has come from people who recognize the importance of culture and the arts in their own communities. The level rose to create all sorts of genuine, original innovation, to use a nice word. So therefore, the cultural industries, I think we have to be very careful. They are full of promise, but they are best when they are linked, as I've said, to clear strategies that enable citizens to achieve their cultural rights. Cultural rights, that is to participate. Now, it's still a very radical thing to say something like this. If you take the 26 million unemployed in the European Union, or the 5.7 million people who are under the age of 35, should they lose their rights to participate as citizens because they don't have disposable income? It was that made me say in my time that the cultural space was always wider than the economic space, and therefore that dysfunctional outcomes in the economic space that produces these gross levels of unemployment must never be accepted as a disqualification from participation in citizenship, including the cultural space. But that leaves you the neglected question, which is only now surfacing again, on the distinction within economic discourse between voluntary and involuntary unemployment. We have to be honest. We need to get a real attack of radical honesty and realize that the world you heard described about great achievements and times in Europe and Britain and elsewhere and whatever, they were achieved when there were certain political assumptions that were guiding the people. After the wars in Britain, for example, that it would be horrendous to have people not being able to be treated properly in hospitals. But it is equally true that in the 1980s, our world changed radically, when the suggestion was that it must be through your individual assertion that you put your stamp on the world, and that there was the gradual accretion of property rights by individuals could replace what was previously a social vision. And these issues remain with us. To the science, to the best of science, to science and culture cooperating, to the world of literature, whatever, there is always a context. And that is why, very frankly, you will see him in the novels, you will see in the poems, you will see in the music, you will see these are the people who are able most adequately and accurately to reveal the agony of the world of the time. And that comes sometimes when you have a combination of intuitive wisdom taken with respect and placed alongside the wonderful, great discoveries of science. I think it was great, the reference in the paper to the deconstruction channel. I do wish we had a deconstruction channel, because there are so many words that we could deconstruct with great benefit to us all. But I must say also as well about what I'm a little suspicious about, and that is the suggestion that really it is essential in science and in combination where we might come together in relation to what is measurable. What is measurable is but is only part of that to which science is directed. That which we wish to know in a Kantian sense is not always measurable. Indeed, one might say that it was the obsession with what is measurable that so clearly distorted the sciences. And in fact, really, the attempt to reach an accommodation with the methodology and practice of the physical sciences that clearly left the social sciences in such a very bad place for so long in so many places around the world. I think it is very interesting, the reference that was made to play. Our lives should be enjoyable. We were not sent and given this little space we have of existence simply only to be useful. Nor were we told that we should tell our neighbours and our children and future generations, you have failed somewhat because the economy is not absorbing you. And yes, it is wonderful that we're producing the best and the most brilliant. But it would be useful too, comparing demographic structures in our European Union, that, in many cases, there is a heavy subsidy intellectually going from parts of Europe to other parts of Europe. But it would make no difference if we were all Europeans together. So our union should not be one of seeking advantage at the cost of others. I think there is something else that is important, which is very exciting about universities. It is the great secret, I think, of scientific discovery. It is that the mistakes never happened. Is that you keep going until out of the blue, something wonderful is discovered to the world, and you communicate it, hopefully without delay, as quickly as possible. All those I respect so much, those scientists I know who stress values like patience, to go in again and again and again, and to be able to wait, to be able, as Humboldt said with his discoveries, on the shoulders of giants, to do the solid work that is necessary over years and that can't be rushed, the patience of science. And that is what I hope the European Union respects, and what member states within the European Union respect. The necessity for that comradeship in the scientific lab, of being able to go on and do things that cannot be rushed. I think all of that is very, very important. I want to finish by simply saying this. It has been a great privilege to be here and to listen to these papers. I very, very much loved those references to the different forms of consciousness which are important. That is what it is all about. How could we say whether it is science or art, for example, for those who apply the Stanislavski technique in relation to theatre? How can you say, is it necessary to draw a distinction between a heightened level of awareness and consciousness to be able to interpret a movement in a play, whatever, and another form of consciousness, which might be the disciplines I have described in relation to scientific discovery? We keep coming back, I suggest, towards the idea of not allowing ourselves, if we like, to be ambushed. To be ambushed in a way that tells us there are shortcuts to a better life. There are no shortcuts in the end. We're stuck with each other. That's what Beckett tells us above all else. And we will fail often, and we'll pick ourselves up, and we go on. But in recognizing that it isn't ourselves that are doing that, but that it is happening every second in different parts of the world, in different cultures, that gives us our best ethical disposition towards the world. And scholarship is so important. It was a privilege to come in here in 1962. It was such a privilege to teach in the university. It was such a privilege to have colleagues that cared for the world. And there are many, many people who often have set aside their personal difficulties because of loyalty to students and loyalty to each other and loyalty to colleagues. And what I suppose I am saying, reducing everything I'm saying, is we need to put all of our things that we do into a new ethical frame. And that would have been the defining contribution of the European Union to the world, to be able to say, men and women regarded as equal in Europe, respect for the environment, more than just respect for the environment, a willingness to intervene quickly at an urgent problem, respect for labour, respect for the involvement of citizens who will sometimes be employed. And remember that some of our graduates, all of them, will sometimes be employed into the future by technologies that do not exist. And the replacement of hubris with humility, that everything we do is only a tentative gesture in life. And therefore, in many cases, the quiet moments when you'll be able to say, I am glad I did this for the benefit of medicine, or for nutrition, or for ending world hunger, or for reducing infantile deaths of infants, is important, rather than an invitation to celebrity. I think we have to look, as it were, in many cases, and draw a deep breath, and abandon the vulgarity of instantaneous recognition of what we do. I hope that this university, I pay tribute to it. I pay tribute to it for the integration that President Brown has in fact done in relation to recognising the importance of the performance arts, as well as making provision for science and engineering and all of these other areas. And really what we do need now, and I'm not at all negative about it, my hope for the social sciences is that I bore people about this, a reintegration of political economy with history, philosophy, sociology and anthropology. And I can tell you, isn't it a great moment to be able to take all of these achievements and to know that we're able to place scientific achievements and technological applications, but to go the extra mile and say, all of this will be done in an ethical context. And that's the message we will be going to in the European Union and the multilateral invitations. I often think of Mike Cooley, having left Vickers Lucas Aerospace, and to go on and make all the things he did in solar heating, artificial kidneys, systems for intermodal transportation. And for that he received the Right Livelihood Award for outstanding vision and work on behalf of our planet and its people. But one last cross little word in the end. It was he who told me too about all the thousands of inventions that were lodged in the patent structures, not only of the European Union, elsewhere. But one of the things the workers found in Lucas Aerospace is that there were several things that would not be allowed into the market because they would dislodge a product for which there was a great deal of investment already. The world would have to wait until the market was satisfied. Well, we need the market, but we need the market as instrument that will deliver all of what you heard of this morning, going into all our lives in an ethical way. This university has had a great history. This university has been well served by so many staff who have worked here. And I hope also, as well as that now, into the future, a mega gobar is coming with the ship when meshi the gobars naherni, no better is naherni social. But in the end, finishing with the phrase, using a good crisis and not wasting it. What we really need now is indeed that, breaking away and creating new paradigms. And the last thing I will say is that came out in several of the points that was there. If one was to be totally honest and say, on that curve, for example, where did the really exciting things happen? They happened when paradigms intersected. That is what you will find in ICT and music. That is what you will find in the really great discoveries. It isn't only just being aware. It is when paradigms intersect with each other as knowledge systems, the most exciting things happen. Edward Seed said here one time, he said, the most exciting things happen in the interstices. And my wish is for the most exciting things to continue to happen in this university. Gurmida Mahake.
Thank you very much.